And I guess we can call August, the way it's kicked off, the month of discontent. But we'll see how it plays out going forward. But let's turn to the president's speech. You see, the President Tinubu took out time to speak about the various economic interventions put in place to assist Nigerians in the face of the economic downturn. The president cited the launch of compressed natural gas initiative to power the transportation economy and bring costs down, noting that it will save over 2 trillion naira a month being used to import PMS and AGO and free up resources for more investment in healthcare and education. Let's take a look at some of what the president had to say.
I am especially pained by the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, and other states, the destruction of facilities in some states, and the wanton looting of supermarkets and shops, contrary to the promise of protest organizers that the protest will be peaceful across the country. The destruction of properties set us back as a nation, as scarce resources will be again used to restore them. I commiserate with the families and relations of those who have died in the protest. We must stop further bloodshed, violence, and destruction. As the president of this country, I must ensure public order in line with the constitutional oath to protect the lives and property of every citizen. Our government will not stand idly by and allow a few with a clear political agenda to tear this nation apart.
Well, the president's speech has triggered a number of reactions, some inspired and some are not impressed at this time. Let's talk to Mr. Udemezue, is the CEO of Flame Consulting, joining me right here in the studio. Great to have you.
Always my pleasure, laddie.
Right.
To be here. Thank you.
A lot has played out since August 1st, and definitely I'm sure you watched our coverage, of it, and which we're still, covering from time to time. But definitely the president, everyone was expecting the president will come out and say something, and he has come out, and he did commiserate with families that lost loved ones and also businesses, that got looted at this time. So I'd like to get your key takeaways from everything the president said.
I think the president's speech, with all due respect, is a self-indictment on the current government. It looks to me like the government just waited for the violent part of this protest to play out so that they can come back and say, oh, we told you so, that's going to be violent. It is a duty of the president as the commander-in-chief of this federation, and the duty of the chief of defense staff who made some political statement some days ago, and the duty of everybody who is in charge of security in their different states to protect businesses and individuals. Peaceful protest is never a violent thing. All right? The government has a duty to protect the protesters as they march along anywhere they would like to protest, and not like the judicial statement that were made that they are restricted to a particular place. That's not within the Constitution. We're going to come to that later. So whenever there's a peaceful protest,
even when we know some of the protesters want to actually block some major roads and some economic activity.
It is wrong for me to accuse or to blame protesters for whatever went wrong in some of the states, like we heard in Kano, Borno, and so on. It is a duty. This protest was announced several days before it happened, even though I'm coming to my own view about the organization of that protest, because the protest had to be even better organized and held on seriously for the number of days they have announced that. Okay, but it's the duty of government, having known and having been put to notice that this protest will happen, it is their duty to galvanize all the defense systems, the police, all the security apparatus in this country to ensure that public peace was maintained while the protest also went on. The duty of the army, duty of the police to ensure that while the protest was going on, every business and every individual in this country was well protected. so that those who were protesting innocently and peacefully could go ahead with their legal activity or constitutionally guaranteed activity, while those who were out to make trouble would be curtailed by the President, Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces of the Republic of Nigeria, and of course other security agencies. So if they failed in doing that, it's therefore, quite annoying, I would say, for the president to now come and say, oh, the protests went violent and he wants to commiserate with families. That's gaslighting.
But I'm wondering, is it possible to have a violent free protest in a country where you have over 60% multi-dimensionally poor?
Hungry
because
people.
I'm wondering, these are a lot of hungry people. And you know what they say about a hungry man.
Okay, and
so is it possible to really have a violence-free protest in a country with over 60%?
It is possible, but it means that there's so much work that must be done by the police, basically, the other defense systems, the army and so on, before the protest. Assigning people at different locations where they know there could be uprisings and so on. It could be done. But because government, instead of focusing on doing that, ab initio started threatening that the protest must not hold, that it was illegal, and we even saw a few judicial pronouncements in a number of states in the federation saying this protest is restricted to particular places. So instead of government working proactively to deal with possible consequences of the protest, they were busy threatening that it must not hold. And that was part of why the protest was not, in my own view, very well organized, because the organizers who were also not very assertive initially, were almost like believing government that it shouldn't hold, so everything was hanging in the air. So even as it now held, it wasn't well organized. Those who were on top of that, protest did not take charge of what they wanted to achieve. Even the complaints or what their grievances are not well articulated. You have a number of things written here and there in different platforms and so on, but they were not organized. If you ask me, I suggest that all the economic policy activists, social activists, civil rights activists groups in this country should more than ever before come together to form a very, stable and sustainable coalition.
But isn't that expected from a leaderless protest?
When you have a leaderless protest, it will go the way this one has gone. Right. But it was meant to be led. But because government started threatening early on, instead of trying to find out who were the leaders, how to make the protest peaceful, they were busy threatening fire and brimstone. And, as you would expect, human beings, they started, taking cover, even denying that they were people were denying who was the protest. They would call, it's P2B, it's Labour Party, it's civil activists and so on. It wasn't clear who was galvanizing it. If the real planners are known, I would like to identify with them. Because for me, in my view, and I have the right to it, peaceful protest is the only line of defense left to save Nigeria's democracy at this point. With all due respect to my lords, all the judges of the state and the federal courts in Nigeria, the judiciary is no more the hope of the common man in Nigeria, looking at the experience we've had in the past years in this country. The legislature, both the state and federal, are no longer working in our favor. We have found most legislators almost captured, only rubber stamping whatever the executive government says. The executive themselves are also not willing to make any sacrifice for the good of this nation. So the three tiers of government, the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, have all failed us in this country. And the political class are not helping matters. We have selfish kind of politics going on in this country, whereby more than 90% of the wealth of the nation is lying in the hands of 1% of people. And if you look at it very well, it's because we are incentivizing bad politics. Somebody can be extremely poor today. Once you grab one position, even at the local government level, you become a millionaire. So what happens now? People are now doing whatever possible, even killing people, doing rituals, doing all kinds of crazy things, sycophancy, hypocrisy, just to get a political appointment, hoping that will change their life for the better. So once you see these people get elected, they forget the masses of the people, and then they go on the side of the bourgeois who are eating large while expecting Nigerians to keep adjusting their belt until they die. So it's a very bad situation. So the only way to rescue whatever remains of our democracy is to allow people to speak their mind in a peaceful manner. So for me, peaceful protest is the only line of defense that we have right now.
Right.
And if we get it killed, then we are all gone. Nigeria is on a precipice. And any further movement in the way we are going right now, we may see people eating human bodies. Nigerians are actually so hungry. I can tell you stories. Even yesterday, somebody spoke with me and said a young man in their office just went berserk. He went mad. He had a lot of bills to pay, hospital bills, food and so, children's school fees, and his salary was not
covering
anything.
We're seeing mental health issues.
Mental health issues everywhere. People
are
frustrated. People are depressed. When Nigerians sleep today, they don't actually look forward to waking up in the morning because they don't know what the new day will hold. All right, so if it's possible to stay in a state of sleepiness for a long period without having to worry about issues around life, medical, food, and all, Nigerians are willing to do that. Waking up is almost like a horror right now in Nigeria. All
right, coming from the previous administration, definitely we know what the Nigerian economy and what this current administration inherited, from the previous the Buhari administration. So, looking at how the economy played out in those 8 years, and looking at over 1 year plus now, do you think that what do you think is the way to come out from the issues that we had in the previous organization, from FX issues to, we saw inflation also, trending up. We even started hiking rates.
The previous administration was a disaster. It was a disaster, all right? Nigerians hurriedly chased away the Goodluck Jonathan government, hoping that we'll get something better. Some of us spoke in a manner that we did. Let's leave that, let the sleeping dog lie. But if you watch even today, the paradox of the whole thing is that this government, were the same people who led the campaign against removal of subsidy, even though we all agreed. Every well-meaning Nigerian who is knowledgeable should know that subsidy has remained a major source of corruption and, fraud in this country. So we all stood for that subsidy removal, which the last government, 8 years of Buhari government, did not try to address. They kept complaining and they kept shifting the date for that removal. So you can say that the government of our dear President Tinubu took a bold step, albeit carelessly, in moving the subsidy. When the Okonjo-Iweala team, the economic team, was planning to do that, and there were engagements around the whole country, we know the popular voices that actually outrightly did not allow that process to go on.
Would it have been better to wait maybe 2 years or 3 years before subsidy?
No, it doesn't have to take 2 years or 3 years. 1-2 months of sacrificial action by government to show that they were willing to adjust on their own part would have done the magic. During the time of Goodluck Jonathan, the engagement that were being done around the country was to let people understand the pains the country was going through in that subsidy removal process. But people who run the government of today, we are blatant saying we didn't want to hear any argument. Do not remove this subsidy. Paradoxically, they are now the ones who removed it carelessly without even engaging anybody. And that's what we're suffering today. Subsidy removal is a very good thing for this country. And even though the protesters have said it clearly, and I stand with the protest, but looking from point of knowledge, you cannot possibly argue or say that it is right for our president to come out today and say, oh, if this subsidy reason why you're protesting, we're going to reverse it. That will not be expected at this point. All right? And you don't also say, oh, we have to peg Naira at 800 because it's also causing inflation. All right?
Because there's a cost for all of that.
That cannot happen. And that's why if you have a coalition of these activists who want to protest, they have to articulate economically viable and possible arguments that can convince government. And if we have enough time, I can make those suggestions myself here.
I'd like to hear those suggestions.
So because we need to protest, in a very organized manner and get government to understand what we believe that must be done and what's also possible to be done. So, all right, so now we are here. This government, let me tell you, it took boldness, even though it was done carelessly, to remove the subsidy, even though many of us still believe that there's some level of subsidy still going on. But let's leave that by the side. But what has been removed has given rise to higher level of revenue for this country. At least we hear now that they share more money in the at the FAC committee. But the question you want to ask is, all the revenue that we have gained from the subsidy removal, who have that, release extra revenue? Who have benefited from that revenue? Have we seen government use part of that revenue to address the hunger, to address the needs of people? Government can afford to place, very cheap bus across every local government in this country. They can do that with some of the savings, But so what you see is that as we get more revenue, we are funding more largesse by this government, by political class. By the way. But when we talk about this government meeting a very big burden, from the previous government, the question is, what are they doing to show that they're willing to sacrifice to get these burdens, lifted and not worsening the situation. Yes, they have done one or two good things by removing the subsidy, but what have they done to counter the negative effect of these policies?
How do they counter that? Because we know this government has complained about revenue.
It may look simplistic, but I assume that if this government wants to care about Nigerians, as we have made some huge savings by removing the subsidy, government should not go increasing their expenditure, particularly, recurrent expenditure, buying more cars for legislators, building.
But we heard that this particular
buildings
government
with billions of naira
is spending more on capital expenditure than recurrent. At
what cost, Ladi? Can you look at our debt obligation? How it has almost tripled in the past few years. For every single drop of capital expenditure you see in this country, so much more have been borrowed. And we are diving deeper into a regime of debt unsustainability, debt trap, like Ghana that announced, insolvency, illiquidity recently, unable to pay their debt. Nigeria is almost at that point. Even though arithmetically, due to the, securitization of our ways and means, yes, you find that debt service to revenue ratio has dropped, but fundamentally our debt burden has increased. So for every single investment in infrastructure you see in this country, so much is being borrowed the more. And even the payments of salaries and so on, this building of erected building for legislator, building this for the vice president, and all of those with 5 billion, 700 billion, it's a no-no. But a government that's running a very broke an insolvent nation almost. So you expect that if this government is sincere, in fact, for any government that wants to turn Nigeria, from the backward movement we're making now to a forward movement, that government must be willing to sacrifice hugely. How do we see the sacrifice? You must cut down all this frivolous expenditure. You are doing a building for vice president with 5 billion. What are you building? Are you building heaven and earth in Nigeria? What are you building? Give me that contract, I'll give you a fantastic building in 500 million or less than that. We all build, and we know the cost of building materials in this country. So it doesn't show carefulness. It shows carelessness and the willingness to continue the wasteful spending. If you look at how much
only solution right now.
For me, the only thing,
sacrifice on the government
even
side.
Though the protest appears to be subsiding, I was on the road coming here, and I found that people are moving, skeletally. Not much is happening right now. So for me, the protest could be postponed, but we must come back with it in a more organized way. The only thing that the president would have spoken in that speech that will make me feel like they are beginning to answer Nigerians, answer us, is, today, or I give 1 month. Nigerians, give me 1 month. We have about 700 parasocial agencies, MD, and so we're going to cut that down to 400. If I don't, hold me accountable. Come back with a protest. Nigerians, we have 50 or so ministers instead of maybe 36 plus 1 that Constitution provides for. I promise you that in the next 1 month or 90 days, I'm just making this point for those who are coalition, who are organizing this protest, to articulate this thing properly. In the next 90 days, if it cannot be done right now, next 90 days, hold me to it. We're going to cut down the ministries to maybe 39 or 40. And trust me, all these aides, special assistant to the minister of this, assistant to special assistant to the minister of that, assistant to who's doing the job, everybody's an assistant. And you see all kinds of offices, cars and so on being wasted. You asked a question to a minister here about the cars in their pool. Even though he claimed he had only 2, trust me, he won't have more, less than 10 in his pool. He could use 2 at a day, but they have a whole lot of, assets.
So bottom line, because of time, bottom line, we need to see sacrifice from the government.
Okay, let me summarize it. The sacrifice I want to see today is that government must immediately, Kenya did that. Even though it took the death of the people in that protest for them to happen. And people say, why do we have to protest and die? And I tell them, are we not all dying by installments? Today, Ladi, I can't go to my village. Nnewi used to be a most peaceful city in Nigeria. Today, it's not anymore. In fact, the whole of Southeast, even in Northeast, Northwest, even in the Southwest, who can go freely to their village anymore? We can't. And you hear a lot of your friends dying by, kidnapping, accidents on bad roads, banditry and all of that. And we say, it's not yet our turn. We are all dying by installments. We can either die at the protest ground, or we die in the hands of bad governance in this country. So while Nigeria may not be, worth dying for right now, we are dying in Nigeria all the same. So I want to see a country where, quickly, if you want to look at what outcome we'll see for this protest to end, eventually, government must seriously adjust the size of the cost of running this government. The Rothschild report they gave a lip service to is another white paper to white paper again. Let us see the end of that, amendment, mergers, acquisitions, and all of that of government agencies. It must happen. Let us also start the process of fiscal and even geopolitical restructuring of this country to make it easier to run our states and make these states profitable.
Okay.
Right? I can't say details.
All right.
Let us see the corruption in the oil and gas system, handled. Let Dangote's refinery and other refineries be able to get crude oil at a very good rate in this country, so we can stop wasting the dollar that we get when we export crude. There's a lot we can recommend here.
So much to refine. So much to refine right here in our country. Thank you so much. Always great to have your perspective, Mr. Udemezue, CEO of Flame Consulting.
Thank you for having me.
We hope for the very best.
Nigeria is our nation. I have single citizenship.
I have no other country.
I don't plan to have any other country except presidency. So we have to get this country right. It's all our duty to do that.
Thank you so much. Well said. All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, we're going to head straight to the markets. I said it before. Hope your portfolio is hanging on tight. We'll be back in a moment.